Ambassador Geoana, thank you for joining us live from NATO headquarters. Welcome.
Good to be again with you, Damon. And I would like to thank the Atlantic Council, your formidable team, and everybody that hopefully will be listening and commenting upon our town hall meeting.
There's been a lot in the media coverage, both here in the United States and in Europe, about an American response that is about America without regard to what's happening in the national community. We've seen a lot of press coverage inside Europe about the lack of Europeans coming to each other's aid. So give us a feel for how you actually see solidarity coming to a fore with around the NAC table.
Well, we have to be honest, and the first reaction of nation states and is the obligation of national governments to take care in the best possible way of their own citizenry. That's something that it's an obligation of any leader and any constellation of leaders in any country in the world, and even more so in democratic nations like ours, that you are obliged to respond to this. So the first instinct, if you want, also political but also psychological, was to try to insulate, to try to cope, to go within your lines of defense. But after the first shock, we started to realize that this is something we cannot fight alone. But we have to also realize that the ones who are not our friends, the ones who are basically trying to redefine the narrative of the commanding heights of how human society is organized, they say that autocratic systems are more efficient in dealing with such crises than democracies. That's the, if you want, the nutshell. This is the essence of this conflict of narratives. We have not been perfect, but I think after an initial instinct of going towards national boundaries, we see now from the US all the way to North Macedonia, the newest member, a renewed sense of solidarity, and I think will be coming out stronger from this crisis.
And so how do you think of the value-added role of the alliance itself? I mean, as you said, this is first and foremost in the hand of national authorities to respond. The EU has obviously been playing a role. You mentioned resilience. The Secretary General talked about Article 3, and most people are unfamiliar with this concept about Article 3, resilience, NATO. What do you see as NATO's unique value added and contribution in the COVID response?
Listen, I mentioned about our DNA. Our DNA is crisis management. Our DNA is command and control. Our DNA is efficiency in logistics and putting together in critical moments the pieces that can make in distress a nation and an alliance work. This is where at best. In other places, we are not the institution of first response. We are not, and we should say that we are not an institution of first response to a pandemic. But when it comes to what we do best, coordination, command and control, strategic airlift, putting medical, military resources together with civilian ones, we are here with decades of experience. We are not having all the answers, but where we do have answers, our instruments are fully functional, and I think they are put to work by all the allies, big or small, strong economies or weaker economies, founding members of the alliance and newcomers into the alliance. And that's, I think, a significant, not only test to our solidarity, but also a testimonial to our endurance capability to work together.
How has NATO been working to address disinformation, specifically the spread of disinformation by China, promoting the narrative of authoritarian regimes providing more efficient responses?
We are basically entering in a logic of, first of all, uncovering the false narratives that are abounding today. And this is something we can fight only with the truth. We can fight it with facts. We can, as I mentioned, encourage our citizens to get information from valid, reliable sources. But if we see, if you want, the meta-narrative, as I mentioned before, is basically that the West, democratic West, is not able to defend its own people, And authoritarian top-down systems are more efficient. Other than disinformation, fictitious facts, conspiracy theories that the virus was invented by Americans, that NATO troops and exercises have been spreading this all over the world, which is totally nonsense and it's blatant lies. There is also a part of soft power projections. We see also medical diplomacy. We also see, speaking of China, sort of a health Silk Road, directing support, not always of the best quality, to be honest, but directing support for countries that are already part of their plan of the Silk Road Initiative. This is a struggle that started before the pandemic. Now it is used and abused and amplified because of the pandemic and the emotions in our public opinions. But I have to say one thing, as somebody who has lived half of my life in the darkness of communism, there is nothing more precious than freedom. There is nothing more precious than living in a country and in a system that you can speak up your mind. I do not want to live again in a jail in open air. So I think that defending our democracy with all its imperfections, improving the way in which our economic system, our social system, our healthcare system do work is important, but never for 1 second. Nobody in the free world should be lured by this total counterintuitive thing that living in an authoritarian regime is better than live in democracy. This is the most untrue thing that has been ever said on this planet.
What are you seeing for NATO-EU cooperation on the crisis itself? But also, what do you think some of the implications are for what this will mean for European concerted effort around European defense and pillar within NATO?
There are lots of things we do. I think there is room to do more. There is room to work better on the new operational domain that NATO has declared, which is outer space. We also have to make sure that when we encourage the creation and a more robust European defense, that this is not done at the expense of the transatlantic. And I think keeping these two organizations working closely together is the interest of both the EU and us in the alliance.
Terrific. I'm going to pick up a question from General Scaparrotti, a former NATO SACEUR, of course, and Atlantic Council board director. He says, I know it's early, but what have been your key lessons learned about processes inside the alliance, and where do you see opportunities to improve NATO's operations on lessons learned from this crisis? In that context, this is I think only your second virtual ministerial. So tell us how to go. How are you operating? How's the headquarters working? And any broader lessons learned that General Scap is asking about?
General, thank you so much. Our respect and our gratitude for your contribution to our great alliance. I'm happy that you're also with the Atlantic Council. That's a great platform. The moment there is clarity from the political level, this organization works exceptionally well. It's smooth, it's agile, it's productive. The moment there is a little bit of fuzziness and we don't have that much clarity, at that moment, of course, we also need to adjust. I have to say that our mission is very clear. They told us, continue to the work on defense and deterrence, make sure that you strengthen the resilience, make sure that you continue to fight terrorism, make sure that we are watching attentively to the rise of China. The moment there is clarity at the top, at the political level, this organization is probably the most efficient one.
You mentioned that it's important for allies to guard against foreign actors, as you said, possibly buying up important security assets in the economic downturn. We've heard this conversation breaking out across Europe, but these are often national decisions, and governments are going to be very strapped financially. So what do we do?
Of course, NATO is not in the position to substitute ourselves to national governments' decisions, but we have seen national decisions going in that direction from Germany, from France, from the US, from many others. We'll do our part in making sure that we have these minimum requirements for allies to satisfy. But then, of course, every national sovereign government has to decide which are the strategic industries they would like to retain or if there is a need, because free markets need to continue to operate, that you do it in a way that could not be abused by benevolent investors in future crises to undercut our resilience and our functioning of our societies.
We've got a question from Rana, who is a former soldier, and he basically says, what can I tell my neighbors in rural Montana about the significance of NATO in their lives? How do you, in your role as Deputy Secretary General, explain why NATO matters to them?
No, I think that not the answer to a question, but the fundamental question about who we are and what do we represent, and if we are really relevant to our citizens and to our taxpayers, is that there's absolutely no human activity that can be built, no business, no family, no dream, no sadness in the absence of peace. Peace is the precondition of human dignity and decent life. This is the business of NATO, to keep 1 billion people and the world, if we can, at peace. We've done this successfully over 70 years now. The moment people know that no matter what, 1 billion people, a combined military strength that is more than 50% of the world's military spending, 30 allies that have more than 50% of global GDP, sticking together, ensuring peace, everything else can be built upon that. And this is a dividend. The dividend of peace is reflected in any paycheck, in any mortgage, in any investment, in any tuition, in any gift you give to your girlfriend or to your grandma or to your kids.
Mr. Ambassador, that was fantastic. What a great word to close on.
Thank you so much. And the Atlantic Council is always living up to its great mission. We are appreciating our partnership. What I've said is coming from the heart. It's not just a scripted thing. I believe in this, and I believe that in testing moments, we can really build even more solidarity and also get out of this stronger together.